Thank you for tuning in to Auto Talk with Jazz. I am your host, Jazmine Booker, and I would love to remind you to like, subscribe, follow if you haven't already, and also be sure to follow me on LinkedIn for my newsletter called Auto Talk with Jazz, where I give a lot more tidbits and also give a follow up for what my guests have stated on the podcast. Speaking of guests, we are having a two-parter where we are talking to Dr. Rob Leone, who is a 20-year vet in business management and leadership, and he is sharing with us two frameworks, which is the reason why this is going to be a two-parter, two frameworks that he uses to help leaders understand their employees, to help better communicate with employees, as well as go into ways that they themselves can be better managers, leaders for the team, and help grow the team. So sit back and enjoy, and can't wait for y'all to hear it. Hello, guys. Thank you for tuning in to Auto Talk with Jazz. I have here with us Dr. Rob Leone, who is a person who has experience in leadership, management, and organizational development of 20 years. I am excited because he's decided to share with us two frameworks that, one, the pictures are amazing because they deal with cars. So obviously, that was going to capture my heart anyway. But he also decided to share with us how we can better our management, how we can better our leadership in the field. Obviously, this can go into any field, but these were some of the things that I feel like we absolutely need to hear in the field. So y'all sit back and relax, and I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Leone and have him just share a whole bunch of tidbits of how we can do better.
Awesome.
How you doing?
Thanks, Jasmine. I'm great. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to share some of my thoughts. Thank you for the introduction. Let me set this up for some people. So I work with organizations in all different industries. So I've been doing this for over 20 years. And what all these industries have in common are people, that people are the lifeblood of the organization, and that if we learn how to work with people better, it's just like playing on the school playground, right? The better you do there, the better your relations are going to be. And so that's what I specialize in. I teach at Idaho State University, professor of human resource development, which means I focus on the behavior and culture aspects of organizations. So improving performance, but not at the expense of the employee. It's trying to find a balance between the two. My wife and I co-founded Black River Performance Management. Our motto is that we believe work should fuel the human spirit and not drain it. And we try to bring that into everything we do. We do a lot of work with leaders and organizations, as I mentioned, in all different industries that are concerned with improving their bottom line, as well as maintaining and supporting their most valuable assets, and those are their people. Do you want to jump straight into some of the models and discuss that? What's on our agenda?
Absolutely. So, one, I think the reason why I was incredibly excited about this was because I believe a lot in the fact that communication is important to any type of, company. Like, if you don't have good communication, if you don't have trust, if you don't believe in the people that you're actually working with, then at this point, why are you in business? Like, what is the purpose of you working? And so I really love this first framework, which is the speedometer framework. And there's actually, I guess, two different things that you have on here that relate to each other, that you can probably better explain than myself. So if you can just explain what is the speedometer framework and why
Sure.
is this important?
Wonderful. And we are going to put this out at some point, right? We're going to
Yes.
give people
Yes.
access to this. So please bear with me as I try to explain this. So the first thing looks at motivation, human motivation. And one of the things we have a tough time understanding is motivation. So motivation is probably one of the most talked about attributes in life, right? And it's kind of one of those sexy workplace things. How do you motivate people or get them motivated, get their work done, right? So let's start with one of my beliefs. My first belief is that motivation is an entirely internal process, that I cannot motivate you, Jasmine, that you have to find that within yourself. But what I can do is create the conditions for you to have the opportunity to dig deep and to kind of to be motivated, to be intrinsically motivated at a high quality level. But sometimes there's things, so if I'm your boss, let's just use this as an example, there's things in our own personal life that I can't remove those barriers so that you can be more motivated, right? So one of the big mistakes and big challenges is that we try to tell people to keep their home life, park it at the front door when you come into the office or come into the shop. The reality is that that's much easier said than done. Like it's tough. Like we are feeling emotional beings, and whether we believe it or not, that stuff's governing our body as we go through the day. So instead of trying to compartmentalize it and say that's your home stuff, this is your work stuff, it's beneficial for managers to figure out, how do I kind of ride the line and accept that Jasmine might have something going on in her home life that might show up at work. Now, as long as it's infrequent, no big deal, right? And we work through that. So, what we know is that we typically talk about motivation as an either or concept, either intrinsic, so totally internalized, or extrinsic, something from outside. Think about an incentive like pay. You get a bonus if you do this. Or think about uh, social pressure, right? In high school, and what are the clothes you're wearing, what kind of shoes you're wearing, what music you're listening to, and how much of that is your own decision versus how much. And if it's your own decision, that's internal, intrinsic. If it's the decision of the peer group or other people, that's external. So we typically talk about motivation as either internal or external. And this is really complicated because there's not a lot we can do with this as a leader. So most leaders can't get bonuses or raise hourly rates or even incentivize people. And what we also know is based on the research is that incentives actually they might work for the time being. Like all of a sudden, look, I can make an extra $10 an hour if I speed up my pace of work, but I over time will pull back if that $10 lowers back to regular, or if I look around me and see other people not working at the pace I'm working at. So we have this personal preservation aspect to us. So what is intrinsic motivation? Intrinsic motivation is an entirely internal process of us navigating our space and finding the opportunities to thrive and to grow and to essentially reproduce like these very organismic types of things. And all organisms have a certain intrinsic motivation, whether it's conscious or not. That's something else to talk about at a different day. So, how do we determine what contributes to high levels of internal motivation? Well, what we know from science is that there's three factors. They're called three basic psychological needs that we all possess. All organisms arguably possess these three basic psychological needs. They might not have consciousness that we have, but they possess these needs. The first one is competence, the ability to do the job or the task correctly, consistently, right? So whether that's a task at work or a task in our home life, or for a single cell organism to thrive, they have to be good at living, right? So basically, and but in the workplace, look, my motivation is at the highest when I'm actually really good at my work. When I'm good at my craft, I feel good and I enjoy work that much more. Okay, so that's competence. The next one is autonomy. Autonomy means independence and agency. And that applies to my home life, that applies to my work life, that applies to the single cell organism we were talking about earlier too. To have independence to choose. Now, we could get super philosophical, but the point here is that, look, if Jazmine, you're competent in your job, I should give you the autonomy. I should give you the space to do your job successfully. This is actually where micromanagement comes in and is a problem. So if you're actually skilled, competent worker, and I hover over you and correct your steps, that's removing an element of independence, right? Removing an element of autonomy. And that is micromanagement. And that is found to drive motivation down because ultimately it's not fun, right? We really are fun seekers, right? So this is what we're trying to do. We're going to spend 8 to 10 hours a day at work. We might as well enjoy it doing it. The last item is relatedness, basic psychological need of connection. Prior to COVID, loneliness was an epidemic. And I say this, and I feel bad saying this, but there's a lot of truth in this because I've lived this in my past. Just because you're with someone doesn't mean you're not lonely. Like that's heavy, right? Like
You can say that
that's
again.
yeah. And so that's why it speaks to this human need of connection and the importance of creating space for that in the workplace and the home place. Because for some people, work becomes a really social event for them and it fuels that piece, it fills that cup. Let's be honest, I can't be everything for my wife, Angie. She's an amazing human, but she needs her friends to help fill off her cup, right? There's certain things that I can give her that they can't, and vice versa. And sometimes that occurs at work, sometimes that occurs in personal life. The same thing is true with every employee. We need to find that balance. And that
You
balance
can't have a
is,
community of one.
yeah, that balance is all over the place for all of us, right? So, what are the three things I said? Competency, autonomy, and relatedness. What does that spell? Car, which is awesome because I love the fact that we're talking about this here because I created this many years ago to help people understand motivation better and understand how to support their people better. So this is what it looks like. So I've had a client reach out to me and say, Rob, I don't know what to do with Gloria. She's not hitting her marks anymore. She's not progressing at the level we need her to progress. I said, well, let's check her car. Did you check her car? And my client says, yeah, I checked her car. I said, well, let's check it together. Let's go through it. Let's talk about competence. Is Gloria competent? She's like, no, Gloria's not competent. It's like, well, okay. Has Gloria ever been competent? So think about this in your own workspace, right? Like if you've learned to change brakes and you're going to do the same system again, you don't unlearn it, right? Something gets in the way. Maybe the tool's not working. Maybe something's seized. Something's changing the conditions here, right? So I said, so is Gloria competent before in the past? She's like, oh yeah. 6 months in, she was training the staff. She was doing great things, but she's not anymore. I said, well, let's be really strict about this definition. It's not that she's not competent anymore. It's something's changed. She's still competent. Something's getting in the way. So let's set that aside. Let's go to her autonomy. So has something changed in the workplace? Because you can see how if you bring in a micromanaging supervisor and put that person over top of someone that's highly competent, that could erode the quality of their work. And so my client said, no, nothing's changed. No new supervisor. She has full independence as she did in the past. I said, okay, so that checks out. How about relatedness? Is there team drama, something different in the workplace? Maybe you hired someone that's changing the dynamics of the team. She said, no, nothing's changed there. It's all the same team. I said, okay. So we know competence isn't really a factor. We know autonomy is not a factor. We know relatedness is not a factor. Did you check her car at home? She was like, whoa, what? No, I'm not checking her car at home. It's not my business to talk about her home life and get into that stuff. I don't do happy hours. I don't do lunches. I don't do conversations with the staff. I keep them really distant. I said, well, that's one perspective. I like to think that your people are spending a lot of time at work. So I'd hope that you show a little bit more interest in their personal life. You don't need to get personal, but demonstrate an interest in their well-being overall. I said, I want you to check her car at home. She's like, I'm not doing that, Rob. I said, please just open the door. Like just ask if everything else is okay at home. Because we
Entertain
already
me, if you will.
yeah. Yeah,
Just
give me
humor
the
me.
benefit of the doubt. And like you already know you've been having conversations with her saying, look, you're not performing. I don't know how much longer we could do this. You're not performing. I don't know how much longer we could do this. You're not performing. At what point am I going to just terminate you or exit you from the organization? Right. So
Mhm.
you have this track record of conversation. I said, use that as a part of your in to check into her personal life. Because it looks something like this. Hey, Gloria, I know we keep talking about this performance stuff. You're missing these deadlines. Is everything okay at home? And just that. That's it. Just do that. And she's like, I don't know, Rob. I said, please just do that and call me back afterwards and let me know. Because what I do with certain clients is we'll do, it's not so much coaching as it is just troubleshooting and walking through things. She calls me back. She's like, Rob, you wouldn't believe this. She opened up and told me all about what's going on in her life. So, you want to learn what happened to Gloria? So, what was going on in Gloria's life was that her 19-year-old live at home daughter is now pregnant. And so that could arguably be challenging some of her assumptions about her role as a mother in terms of her competence, right? Raising her. She is at odds with her husband. So you talk about relatedness, right? Connection.
Mhm.
That's eroding the quality there. And her mother-in-law is moving in. So you want to talk about autonomy, right? So the car at work checked out. Nothing's really changed. But what we learned was the car at home had some issues. And that's what we needed to better understand. And so when we work with people and yourself, and think about it, I'm not firing on all cylinders and I'm just not feeling it. How am I doing in terms of my competence, autonomy, or relatedness? Whatever it is you want to look at. And what I found personally, I found my relatedness was low before, or my competence was low, or someone was hovering over me, or someone I was in a relationship wouldn't give me my space and my independence and was control. All these things, think about it. All these things that are emotional and that are carried on our shoulder have impacts on us when we're at work. So, anyways, what we know is that firing at high levels of C, A, and R lead to high quality intrinsic motivation. And that intrinsic motivation is what we want out of people, right? We want people working hard. We want people having fun at work. I know we don't often think about that, but come on, let's be honest. 8 to 10 hours a day there, something better be enjoyable, right?
At least have one laugh.
Yeah, exactly. There's got to be
Just
some
one.
levity. It's not all about business performance and outcomes and stuff like that. So I'm hoping someone in the audience connects with this. Like, this is what I want to do with my team, because I know we have industries that have historical perspectives that don't necessarily fit this paradigm or this model, right? That
Right.
that just work hard, and if you don't do what I say, we're going to move you on and go with the next person. And we know that costs us time and time and time again. And just because we might pay more than the shop down the street doesn't mean that that's going to retain our good employees. So those are the three factors that factor into high quality intrinsic motivation. So, Jasmine, you're talking about the speedometer, right? So think about in the car that has that rainbow, right? The speedometer.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, I was thinking of like the old like IROC Zeds and stuff that were vertical. Those don't work. So think about the rainbow speedometer. So what we have is we have four factors in that speedometer. They're at one end is intrinsic motivation, at the other end is extrinsic motivation. And once again, extrinsic motivation can be anything that's stimulated from the outside, whether that's social acceptance, incentives, things like that. Intrinsic motivation are those three pieces, those car pieces, right? So what about what's in between? We have two different factors in between, and we've created this model because this is where we make some mistakes, and this is also where we have the most influence over people in our life. So we've already determined that managers really don't have a whole lot of say over extrinsic motivators, incentives. So how else can they cultivate high quality motivation in people? Well, what we look at are two different factors in the inside. We have imposition and we have alignment. Which one sounds more inviting, imposition or alignment?
Alignment.
Yeah, alignment means much
Like,
more we're on the same page, right?
mhm.
But let me ask you this. You ever give someone some advice?
Yes. Yes.
And
All
we
the
like
time. I
giving
try.
advice, right? We like giving advice. we sometimes don't like getting advice. So what we know about the science is that people that want advice and ask for it are more welcoming of it. They enjoy receiving it. But if I just tell you, if I'm venting to you and then you give me your advice, I didn't ask you for your perspective. I just want you to hear me out, right? But why do we provide people with advice?
Either because we're trying to be helpful
Yep.
or we're trying to feel some type of, thing that we think is that we feel like we could help them with, or maybe
Yeah.
we're trying to remind ourselves of that same advice that we should already know.
Yeah, right, right. This is a refresher for me. Don't do what I did, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think your first example is spot on, right? Like that we've earned our lumps. I made
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. I want to shortcut your life experiences so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. So let
Like,
me
don't do what I did. Don't
yeah,
do it.
let me just do what I say, don't do what I do, right? Or don't
Yes.
do what I did. And
Mm-hmm.
that's called imposition. So what I'm doing now is I'm imposing. So you think about I have a couple boys. And if I tell them what I think they should be doing, you better go to college or don't drive fast, or those are all directives which are
Mm-hmm.
tied to demotivation. And we know, like when we tell children or teenagers what not to do, what happens, right? So that never works out well.
Yeah.
So I can't live in that imposition space, but a lot of leaders do, right? They can't do anything about the extrinsic rewards. So they move into imposition, they move into this direction phase, which says, Jazmine, I need you to do this. Jazmine, go get that. Jazmine, accomplish this. And they think they're being helpful because they're providing direction, but what they don't realize is that they failed to build some alignment with you so that you realize why this is important. And
Mm-hmm.
so we turn to imposition frequently because it's a time saver. It,
Yes.
just tell me what to do. Except for people don't want to just be told what to do. They want to understand why they should do it and what's in it for them.
And it
And so,
also, I just want to add this in there
yeah.
for some people. Just because you did it 8 years ago does not mean
Yeah, right?
I just want to add that in there. Do not tell me, oh, 8 years
Yeah,
ago, whenever I was on the front lines, I knew how to do it. No, that was 8 years ago with
yeah,
a different set of rules.
yep,
You weren't even manager back then. You were
yeah.
here, and there's a whole bunch of laws that y'all have now put in place that were not there whenever you did this.
And by the way, we don't know if you were actually really that good at when you were doing it.
Well, I'm not going to add that in there, but
We're on the
or
same
my
page.
favorite one, oh, we were the original people to put this in place. And obviously, you're now trying to fix some things that the original people
Right.
didn't know to do.
Yeah,
And you're still not doing it because you're now managing it. You're not the doers of it. So
yeah,
that's also a whole nother conversation. But I would like to put that out there. Do not remind us that you did this 8 years ago and you therefore know what we're feeling right now because you don't.
right. Exactly. So let's move more towards intrinsic, right? We want to get more internal because
Yes.
what we've determined is when people see the model, they'll either see the words imposed or an S and an E, which means somewhat external. Because
Mhm.
if you think about it, what's the impetus? Where's the energy coming from? It's coming from the external. The person's trying to put it into you. So it's
Mhm.
external. So let's move into an SI category, somewhat internal. It's not quite intrinsic because you'd figure it out yourself and you'd do it because you'd want to. But sometimes we have situations where me saying, Jazmine, do this isn't the best situation,
No.
but you're still not doing it yourself because you didn't realize you needed to do it. But what I need to do is paint a picture of why it's important for us to accomplish this essentially together. That I need you to do this because I'm building alignment because this is something that we've committed to, or this is actually something I want to give you that you've expressed interest in. You just didn't see it because my direction was so shortened to the point that you missed it, right? So
Right.
that category is called alignment, and it's almost more coaching, advising. I think of it as the leaders being a partner in the solution. that you are still going to do the work, but I'm
Right.
trying to help you understand why this is important, why this is relevant. And just because I said so, I could use that maybe once or twice, but over the long run, I'm not going to win anyone over with turning to that
No,
as because
no.
it's my decision and I said so, or I'm the owner, I'm the boss, I'm the manager. People want more compassionate organizations and people that are understanding. At the end of the day, you at least want to know that, hey, Rob, my boss, might be rough around the edges, but I know he has my back, right? And that is something that's important. So, anyways, so getting back to the speedometer, the far side is extrinsic. It's in the red section. We want to stay away from that. As we move into the imposition section, we're a little orangey color because we're moving away from the red, moving more towards the yellow, because once we hit yellow, we're starting to become more internalized and at a
Mhm.
better space. And then eventually green is where we want to be, and that's intrinsic. And we just people are learners, and we develop over time, so we need that kind of cultivation to help us move to that spot. So there is our car model. We use it with every organization we work with. I teach a motivation course at the university and I share it with them against the science of motivation, because what it does is it takes the science topics and creates it in a very palatable way that people could go ahead and put it to work.
Well, and what I do love about that framework about motivation is a lot of people don't understand that there are multiple types of motivation, and that sometimes whenever you're trying to do even self motivation in your personal life, or let's say you're trying to build a habit,
Hmm.
well, the reason why for anything is going to come back to what was your motivation to even start this? Why
Hmm.
are we even starting this habit? Is because you're trying to deal with health? Is it
Yeah.
because, maybe you just want to figure out discipline
Yeah.
in your life, or maybe you're trying to save money or whatever.
Yeah.
You are literally trying to build something within your space, within your personal life, or within work or whatever, to become better. And if you are able to find that same type of thing at work, that's even better. So
Hmm.
that's what I absolutely love about that whole process. And so I do want to ask one question, and
Yeah.
I think you kind of really did touch upon this, but um, if no one actually caught it, why is it important for leaders or managers to actually care about what motivates their employees? And why is it important for them to understand what motivates them? Because it
Hmm.
kind of goes back to that manager you were talking about. He was very against asking his employee what's going on at work. What did you
Yeah.
check her car? But you had to motivate him to do it, and you couldn't just tell him to do it. You had to be like, well, maybe this. And then once he actually did it, he realized what was going on. You actually kind of used that to motivate him to do what you needed him to do
Hmm.
for even the other part of that framework.
Yeah. Yeah. I aligned that person, right? As opposed to telling them what to do. I spent the time to align it because it wasn't quite intrinsic
Hmm.
and it wasn't going to do any good for me to say, I need you to do this. Just do this. We create
Hmm.
that alignment. So something I didn't mention, there's a lot of different motivation frameworks and models and tools and assessments and all different things that come from all different schools of thought. So I would consider myself a motivation purist or fundamentalist in the sense of we talk about a lot of things that we use the word motivation a lot, right? Like we just throw it around.
Right.
I encourage my staff and my team and my students to protect motivation based on the car, those three things. Everything else out there, you hear that people are motivated by learning, people are motivated by money, once again, people are motivated by being in charge,
Hmm.
fancy cars, all these different things. I call all that other stuff preferences, and here's why. We talk about motivation loosely all the time. You and I aren't going to be on the same page. So,
Hmm.
why is this important to the leader? It's important to leader because these three basic psychological needs fuel our behavior
Yeah.
and our ability to move up in life in terms of having a better sense of ourselves. And if I'm deficient or if my staff is deficient in any one of those three areas,
Mm.
that is likely to carry into the workplace, whether it's from the workplace or from home, and
Yep.
interrupt the work. So if you're having issues at home with respect to, say, your friend group, and I'm your supervisor,
Yeah.
I need to at least be sensitive that there's stuff that might be going on at home that could be affecting your quality of work at the shop. And it's not like just, it's a level of awareness and open-mindedness. I think I shared with you earlier that, and it might not have been during our recording, that my belief is that the leader, the manager's job is to create the conditions for the people to be successful. And
Yep.
part of that is also helping them resolve and work through some things that are outside of the scope of work. And I'm not saying be a counselor, I'm not saying pry. I'm just saying be aware that a person might not be as quick, let's say, to complete a task because their mind's being preoccupied by some other things. And then in an industry such as this, where safety is an issue,
Yes.
right? When your mind's not necessarily present, you open up yourself to more risk. So there's a reason why this is important for us to be concerned about this because it's the human thing to do to be concerned about your people. Because people that feel supported and heard stay in the organization, even if they make less,
Yeah.
because they feel that there's support, they feel like they have camaraderie, they have a sense of community with the team, and that's important for people's well-being. And we see this all the time that people will leave a job anywhere for a quarter to $20 more an hour, even more,
Yeah.
and then regret it because they were chasing the money and they didn't realize how good they had it in their current position.
Absolutely. And the thing that people do forget and tend to forget that sometimes the grass is not greener on the other side,
Yeah,
but you shouldn't make it so easy for people to try to leave you knowing the fact that it's not going to be greener on the other side. But if they're willing to make that jump and figure it out the hard way,
yeah,
we need to have the conversation of why they're willing to jump and do that.
yeah,
Um, because we shouldn't you shouldn't be able to lose people that easily and then they'd be able to walk back in and be like, "Ha, I told you so." We don't need
yeah.
that. We don't
There's
need
there,
that.
there's a level of self-awareness that's important here and humility, right? So sometimes people have good shops and they think it speaks for themselves. They don't need to take care of people
Mhm.
and let them go if they want to go.
That's a
There might be
level of
some
arrogance. Yeah.
yeah, there might be some accuracy and truth to that. This is a good gig, but at the same time, what are you demonstrating if they were actually a good employee that just needed a little bit more care, right? Maybe no one else cares about them except for this shop, the people on this team. That's
That's
important.
actually a good
That's,
point.
you know
There's
what
a
I
lot
mean?
of people who make the shop their home because they feel like family. Um,
Exactly.
and I did get on the soapbox and talked about how we often say the words, the shop will always say, "Oh, we're a family here." And one of my previous guests actually said the words of, "Well, it all depends on what type of family you got." Because
Right.
if you tell someone, you tell the wrong person, "Oh, I'll treat you like family," it's like, "Oh, don't treat
Yeah.
me like family. Like,
Yeah.
don't treat me like family." But there are other people who have a great family. If you tell them that and then you treat them like family and you treat them wrong, they're definitely going to leave. So
Yeah.
I tell people just stay away from the
Yeah.
conversation of treating them like family, but also in your head, treat them how like a family's supposed to treat people
Yeah.
with respect, listening to each other, communicating effectively,
Yeah.
actually providing that trust and comfort to come to you about an issue, like you said, whether it is business or like in the workplace or personally.
Yeah.
Because if I can't trust you enough to come to you when I'm having a hard time, why should I trust you at my good times?
Right. Yeah, I like to. I push back on that family concept too because um, everyone's family is different, and some
Mhm.
people are trying to get away from them, and some people, if I had the choice, I wouldn't affiliate with these people.
Mhm.
I like the example of a community better because
Mhm.
community has all sorts of people, people you like, people you don't, people you have to respect and learn how
Mhm.
to deal with things like that. But at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about a community is that they often rally together and pull through for that group. And that's
Yeah.
why I like that example.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. That was the first part. Tune back in for next week, and we will go over the second framework that Dr. Rob Leon has. Have a nice day. See you next week. Bye.